New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Rev Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And this is New Thought Today. Comes to you every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time here on the New Thought Media Network, where we take a look at the evolving expression of the New Thought philosophy, often through an integral lens, through a religious science lens, through all kinds of various lenses and all kinds of various experiences and intersections. And today we are incredibly grateful and happy that you're with us, because we've got a good friend and a wonderful, wonderful special guest with us today. Reverend Rafe Ellis from the Sierra Center for Spiritual Living. Reverend Rafe, welcome aboard. Hello, hello.
Hello, welcome. Glad to be here.
Oh, glad you are with us as well. So last week, Z, you were off into the world a little bit. Tell folks where you were just briefly.
Yeah, I was, as the song goes, on the road again. I was taking my son to Texas to fulfill his obligation, if you will, for a summer internship. And that officially started yesterday. And so far, so good. He's having a ball for a whole full day and a half. It's a 12-week experience that he's having. And I'm so glad for him. And now I'm back in the saddle and ready to rock and roll.
Oh, wonderful. Great, great, great. And so if you tuned in last week, folks, and recognized that we shared a rebroadcast, well, welcome back to our live broadcasts. And Reverend Rafe, we forget to tell our guests often that we're just going to allow you to introduce yourself for a moment here. So share with the folks where you are in the world and who you are in the world, and let us know a little bit more about you.
It's good to be here. I am Reverend Rafe Ellis. I am the senior minister at Sierra Center for Spiritual Living in Grass Valley, California, which is up in the Sierra foothills, about 45 minutes south of Lake Tahoe. I am a female to male transgender man married to a mixed race woman. Born and raised in the South, lived a lot of my life in invisibility, and then less invisible, but still invisible, living most of my adult life from my early 20s to 43 as a lesbian, and then finally coming into full alignment with who I had always been in my 43rd year on this planet. I am a father, a grandfather. My son is deceased. Which is an interesting time coming up on Father's Day, but it's an okay time because it's a cherished memory, and it's the depth of love makes the grief precious. Nice. So it's all good. Yeah.
Excellent. So I am so glad you're here with us today as we take this edition to look at the whole celebration in June of Pride. And so I can't even get the words out of how special it is to have you to speak to this whole spectrum of the LGBTQ plus community, its place in the world, its gifts, its talents, and everything that we have gained. And more importantly, the ability to work beyond the seen and the known as to the oneness, and not the collapse of. Let's not try to make homogenized milk, which we in the U.S. do. We want the milk to last forever, and it ain't gonna last forever. So let's just get the milk and drink it the way it is. Goat's milk, cow's milk. Excuse me for the expressions, but I think that brings a stark And being from the South, having had to drink all those different milks, it makes it very palatable in my mind of the beauty and essence of this continual unfolding of acceptance and honoring life as it is.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for recognizing, honoring, and celebrating Pride Month.
Yeah.
You know, and just a very brief history. Pride Month actually came about as a recognition, an annual recognition of the Stonewall riots, where the LGBTQ community finally had enough of being oppressed and raided by the police, who were in bed with the mafia who owned the bars. And so, I mean, it all goes back to the economy and follow the money. With any oppressive system, follow the money, and we get to the root of it. That's just a human reality that we seem to continue to create. But it's interesting because the Stonewall riots were actually initiated by a Black transgender woman, Marsha P. Johnson, threw the first brick. Sister had enough. And over the years, and even in documentaries that address Stonewall and Pride Month, it got whitewashed and it got moved into male supremacy because Marsha P. Johnson summarily dismissed from the process. And even in the most recent, I think it was a 2015 documentary on Stonewall, she wasn't even mentioned, which is interesting. Over the years, Pride Month for a long time was Gay Pride Month. And even though gay pride is a somewhat universal term, if we're telling the truth, gay typically refers to gay men, lesbian to gay women, transgender. And so just the fact that for a long time it was just called gay pride speaks to this tendency that we have especially in the American culture, for everything to silently, passively shift to white male supremacy. And I don't think for 1 minute that it is intentional or conscious when it happens. On some, sometimes it is, but in the broad spectrum, I think it is just the unconscious activity of how we have been socialized for it to simply be that way. Yeah. Because if we paid attention, then we're empowered to shift it. But supremacy is intentionally subversive so that we don't notice it. It's encoded into our culture so that it silently perpetuates itself at every level. And, we're in a really beautiful part of history where we have finally seemed to, we seem to have finally tipped the scale to where collectively we're unwilling to go back to sleep. Because we've been here before. Something happens that it wakes us up, but then we passively drift back to sleep. And I think we have finally hit a place where enough of us are unwilling to go back to sleep that we really have the potential to change a culture and the direction of evolution.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point, because when you were speaking about the documentaries and the historical perspective that is being presented, the immediate thing that jumped into my mind was something we talked about either last week or week before last on one of our shows, is this whole thing about the lieutenant colonel who was at a Memorial Day program speaking about African American history, African Americans' involvement in the history of Memorial Day, and they cut the mic off for 2 minutes. They cut the mic off so he couldn't express his knowledge and understanding of the involvement of someone or some people who are considered other than, to be fully understood in truth. And for any documentary to be presented and not speak of the starting of the Stonewall riots and about Marsha and then I know the next year Brenda Howard, who was a bisexual, as she claimed, was the one who started the parading and celebration. Those things aren't mentioned, and it's like, how can you reflect history, and how can you have the right and proper perspective to move forward if I don't have all the pieces to the puzzle? Yeah. And that's bad.
Yeah. Well, we move forward what we want the world to focus on. And so that's what we present. I mean, even in science of mind, even in New Thought, we have a tendency to look at this stuff as either not our concern or as something that's new. And in fact, it's not new. We can go back to, I think it's 1911, where Horatio Willis Dresser, in the history of New Thought, is very clear when he articulates that we now see that all true justice must be social. So this idea that social justice is new in New Thought, not new. 101 years is not new. That's not new. And it's all, if we look even below the surface, it's about relationship.
Yes.
And it's about relationship with ourselves as one another. It's Ernest Holmes, in the most current version of the Science of Mind book, says that the purpose of Science of Mind is to help us reconcile. And the word reconcile means to bring into harmony the apparent difference between our spirituality and our humanity.
Right.
That's the whole purpose, is to navigate that relationship of apparent separation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not new. In the 1926 version, and I think you guys have an overlay of this, Ernest Holmes wrote, "Man coming from unity is both male and female, and has within himself both attributes of reality. In some, the male predominates, in others, the female. We have two distinct types in man and woman, but they are types of one fundamental principle. There is also an intermediate sex, that is, one in which the two attributes seem to be almost equally balanced. The greatest men and women of the ages have belonged to this type, for it is a more complete balance between the two, which are really one." So, here Holmes is speaking to heterosexual, bisexual, transsexual, non-binary, whatever label we want to put on it. There it is in 1926.
Yeah.
And could it be in gender neutral language? Sure, it could now. I don't think the term gender neutral language was even available to Ernest Holmes.
Right.
To think about. Had it been, I suspect he would have leaned in that direction, from everything I see. So it's, even in our own teachings, the invitations are there to really bring us to a place of wholeness, if we're willing to see them. But we're only going to see what we want to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you speak about the opposites and reconciling the opposites, that just hits home with me, because one of my foundational teachings comes from the Kabbalion, and it speaks of, we live in a world of polarity. That's so we can capture the wholeness of things.
Yes.
But when we are not able to reconcile those opposites, we continue to swing from extreme to extreme, destroying the wholeness of everything as we go along. And I mean, that's surely evident today, right? No matter what point is made, whether it's, whether sugar is too sweet or whether we should continue exploring space, someone is on the extreme of that point, not trying to figure out how do we find that balance point, that middle point that sways, that shifts to the moving winds, that shifts to any earth anomalies, to keep the thing standing straight and tall. And that's why for me it's such an honor to participate in these kinds of conversations, in bringing this information to the public, because for so long it's been people have been hiding from it. Now, let's say you and I, Reverend Rafe, we're brothers of the South, and I know, I'm not going to even try to put a number on it, but I know for a fact, in the Black church for a very long time, a large majority or a large number of the music directors in the churches were gay.
Mm-hmm.
But and so just look at the dichotomy there, preaching one thing from the pulpit, and sometimes it was more subtle than overt, but it was still there. And then the person who is in charge of the music, which is the very thing that excites the spirit of the human being, was totally in opposition to the thing that was being talked about. And so, imagine going through life having that taught to you, and then when you get to be an adult and you find out, well, that ain't quite true. How do you reconcile that? Now your cultural training has put you in such a bind that it takes some unwinding to do.
Oh, it does. And I don't have to imagine it. I've lived it. I was raised in varying degrees of Christian fundamentalism. Mm-hmm. We started Methodist, then went to Baptist, then Southern Baptist, then Pentecostal Holiness, all the way to Pentecostal Holiness House Church with the snake handling, the whole 9 yards. So I've lived that condemnation. And there's really no other word for it. It's a place where God expressing as me is somehow not God now, because it doesn't agree with a human's version.
Right.
And, we subdivide God into cultures of rightness and wrongness for our own human glorification, not for the glorification of the one. And it's been an important journey for me to go back and unravel the misteachings that I was given of the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
To reclaim the magnificence of the stories and the teachings of the Bible, because they are brilliant. The way I was beat up by them is inhumane, but the Bible itself is amazing. The one verse that was really used brutally is that for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But when we break that down in the original language, what that means is that we've all made mistakes and fall short of living in perfect alignment of our human consciousness with Christ consciousness. Yeah. That's all it means. That the glory of God in the Greek is that moment where our human consciousness is in perfect alignment with consciousness. And what a moment that is. Now I can accept that I don't live there all the time. That's just straight up true. But it doesn't condemn me to a place of hellfire and brimstone. It simply means, oh, I'm on my perfect journey. Cool.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and it's so it's like everything. I love the term unraveling, because it really is unraveling. And as we unravel, we reveal the truth that was always there. It's just covered up in this ball of knotted up stuff.
Yeah.
That we haven't managed, despite our best efforts, we have yet to destroy anything. We've just clouded it and made it inaccessible in the moment. But we cannot destroy truth.
Right.
No matter how much we try, we can't. It's always right there waiting to be unraveled and revealed.
And you know, that's such a great statement, especially in light of religious science, because in the first page of the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest says, I just shudder in joy the day when religion and science, or spirituality and science, or philosophy and science walk hand in hand, because those two things together allows that unraveling.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about where quantum physics was when it was by Planck and all of that crew back when they first came up with this idea, and at that time there was there's the running joke that if you ask the scientist if he believed in God, he says, of course not. And now today, if you ask the scientist if he believes in God, he says, of course I do. Because through that unraveling, they've been able to see and find out and prove that there is something that's in place here that they can't account for in their math models. They can't account for in their scalpels cutting smaller and smalling to unravel. Yeah. And at every point they make the incision thinking that, aha, this is it. There's more to be unraveled. You know, I love this statement by Alan Watts, who said, as long as we keep making microscopes finer and telescopes wider, we're never going to get to the end of this, because we're going to keep finding more vastness and more smallness. And yeah. So that's where we are now in terms of trying to understand the totality of the human being, the human spirit, the different ways of expression.
Yeah.
And when we can, as Ernest says, stay open at the top, mm-hmm. then we have the ability to take this new information and reconcile it with all of the stuff that's been there before. And in some cases, we might have to, dip the cup a little bit and pour a little bit out, because it don't work no more.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think there's an important piece here, and you spoke to this a little bit a few moments ago, Reverend Rafe, of, right, you have had your lived experiences that absolutely qualify and quantify that this is a part of the reality. Mm-hmm. I feel very blessed. We get to speak to an audience that, for the most part, sees a very, very similar perspective. It's interesting that I also see in the world a lot of people truly in the New Thought movement, or that are recently leaving the New Thought movement also. Mm-hmm. And I have direct experience of people that are leaving the New Thought movement because New Thought's willing to take a stand, to come forward and say, this is what we see. We see equity. We are working towards this piece of equity with all of our brothers and sisters, mm-hmm. no matter, and our brethren in the middle there.
Mm-hmm.
it can be, and I guess I would invite you, I would ask, what would you say to someone uh, that's perhaps questioning how, beyond the quote that we've shared, how they can reconcile this seeming difference
Well,
from a New Thought perspective? Yeah.
right. So, and I have these conversations frequently. For me, the bottom line is we go back to the core of our teaching, which is wholeness, a wholeness of one, right? Which is not sameness. Creation itself, every expression of creation must be diverse. It must be, because if we think about it in scientific terms, an infinite anything cannot increase itself because it's already infinite. What are you going to add to infinite? Nothing, right? The only thing that consciousness can expand within itself is experience of itself, because it's already infinite in everything, in every other way. And so the only way it can expand itself in experience is through diversity. And so to say that we're not going to take a stand to celebrate diversity is to consciously say we're not going to take a stand to celebrate creation. We're not going to take a stand for what we actually say we believe. And we have to also understand that we are spiritual beings having a very human experience. And we have to be honest enough with ourselves to hold ourselves accountable for wanting a comfort zone where growth stops. to be willing to say, this is as far as I really wanted to go. I mean,
I'm good. I'm done.
Right.
The
best email I have ever gotten from someone who consciously chose to leave the community said exactly that. This individual wrote me an email shortly after I arrived and said, your sermons are amazing. They're brilliant. They push me to grow. And honestly, I do not want to grow, so I will not be back. Now,
hey, that's honest,
right? And I celebrate this individual's honesty, right? And so great, let's just tell the truth that I'm leaving because I like my comfort zone and I don't want to grow beyond it. And so I really am not willing to live in full alignment with these teachings. And so that's why I'm leaving. But it's hard to do that. It's easier to be in that place of victimhood and that I have to leave because you're doing something. Whether we blame the minister, whether we blame other people in the center, whether we blame the organization, we will find someone to blame so that we don't have to sit with ourselves. Right. And that's okay, because the very thing that created us gave us the power of that choice. And perhaps one of the biggest downfalls that we have is that we refuse to celebrate one another's choice to be limited, if that's what we choose to be. And yet what created us gives us that choice. So who am I to say your choice is wrong or bad? You have the power of choice. Use it. My opportunity, my joy is to celebrate you for making a choice. And to empower you to be consciously, honestly claiming your choice and celebrating your choice. Because if we can't celebrate it, perhaps it's not really the best choice for us.
And Reverend Rafe, you bring to mind a little conversation we had before we went on the air. That this whole thing about spiritual beings have a human experience. So our humanness is the box that we're in.
Yes.
And I remember when I took my first course, there was this little video we had about being in boxes, and that we're in a box, and we do some things and make it bigger, or we keep switching to a box, but ultimately we're still in a box. And it's until we can free ourselves or be willing to give up the box that we're in, and express and embrace our fullness of spirit, we will continue to have these problems. And it's like the knotless or hermit crabs or things like that. They understand it. And for those of you who've been on the show, I love nature. I think nature is the ultimate sacred scripture. And within that nature, we know that if a hermit crab is in a shell that's not allowing it to continue to grow, it will die. So what does it do? It makes itself vulnerable, because the part of it that's in the shell is the vulnerable part. It moves out of that thing, comes vulnerable for a moment of time, and then moves into another box, another shell, which is bigger. Now, he's still in a box, but he understands that. He says, I will grow to my limits here, and then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to share this one and get another one. Yeah. And that's what we have to begin to do, and learn these lessons from nature that say life is a continual unfoldment and expanding, and you could become a relic, or you could become a star child and just keep moving in the future.
Yeah.
I spoke about this morning in my morning program, that you're either growing or you're dying.
Yeah,
one or the other. You're on that continuum somewhere. The longer I can keep growing, the longer I can keep exploring and expanding my consciousness, my awareness, then I believe that I'm staying healthy, staying young, staying vital, staying in the game. And I'm struck that what I keep hearing in myself is that the first barrier to healing is that acceptance and that awareness and that willingness to say, all right, I'm going to continue to grow. I'm going to own up to the fact that I am up against my own limited thinking here. I am up against my own limited perceptions of how things are supposed to be, how things were supposed to go, how and there's a piece here that, so it's in that limited thinking that the healing begins, and the awareness of that. But it is also ingrained in so many of us that, no, I'm good. Like I got this. I don't need to heal. I'm all okay. And especially as a white cisgendered male guy, whatever, when my eldest shared with us that transgender male teenager is not what we have believed our whole lives, is not what he has felt his whole life, and that things are going to change in our family, we get to run up against our own limiting beliefs. That is where the healing begins, but that's also where so many people want to arrest the healing.
Yeah.
And don't want to move forward. And as you've spoken to here today, Reverend Rafe, right, and want to stay in my comfort zone.
Well, and I think we have to be really careful of that W word, because to say that someone wants to stay there assigns an intention and a judgment that I think is wholly unfair.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I don't know what another human being wants. I don't have any idea what they want. I can observe the outpicturing of what they believe. But how many times do we believe something even when we don't want to believe it? And I think it's a cruel and unjust assessment to say that people want to stay stuck. I don't think that's fair. I think one of the most brilliant explanations that I've seen of how language and programming work in our minds is the first chapter of The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Before you ever get to anything about the Four Agreements, that first chapter, and I've taught a whole 4-week class on just the first chapter. Okay. Because most people can't even tell you what's in that first chapter because they're in a hurry to get to the Four Agreements. They're in a hurry to get to the solution. The solution is in that first chapter where he brilliantly articulates how language functions, how every word is operating as an agreement of meaning and culture. And it's, if we don't take the time to reconcile our agreements with language, we inadvertently reinforce the very beliefs we're trying to change through the words that we're using.
You know, that's, yeah. I don't want to interrupt you, but there's this saying in the South that my word is my bond.
Yeah.
You can read a whole lot into that just by what you are indicating right there. It could be my bond as it's going to bind me up, or it's going to be my bond as I'm going to try to live this. And when I can, I'm going to disavow and move to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the language that we're taught is generational. It's generational meaning. That's where the enculturation lives that we're not even aware of. It's the stuff that, you know, in Buddhism, it's that karmic thread of human tendencies that we carry forward in the meaning of language and words that we are completely unaware is operating. And when we take it to what we know in metaphysics of a collective consciousness where every thought that has ever been thunk is eternal, right? So we can change our relationship to it, but we cannot eliminate anything in the eternal. It's always there. It might, on some level, maybe sort of kind of behoove us to address that.
And that speaks directly to the whole field of epigenetics, right? Because epigenetics speaks to, you know, people talk about the DNA and that I'm you know, genetically destined, yada, yada, yada. But from the field of epigenetics, it says it's not just the DNA, it's the environment that DNA is fired in. And so if we look at that in terms of how people are developing and unfolding, the blueprint in the DNA they're finding out as they unravel that, right? The possibilities for every, you know, they start talking about the DNA between this species and that species is some infantile percentage. And now when we start looking at epigenetics, well, there potentially was some environmental thing that made that happen. And so when we look at human beings and look at the epigenetics of whether we grow up in poverty or supremacy or being hated or being loved or being praised or being whatever, it begins to fire the DNA in different ways, and we come out differently, and we begin to have a tendency to pass that on to our offspring. And if that environmental condition exists again, something will happen. And so in my mind, as you were just saying, Reverend Ray, it behooves us to take everything into account. Our language, our body language, not just spoken language, body language, you know, how we greet people, how we keep our living spaces, all of this stuff affects, especially the word and how we speak it, the meaning behind it, and the wholeness of who and what we are.
Yeah. And I think for me, and this is all I can really pass on with any level of expertise, is what I have been willing to explore and walk myself, right? I can throw out all the book knowledge I want with little to no credibility, or I can walk this talk and speak from experience. And so for me, every place where I meet resistance is calling me to a deeper alignment, because it's the out of alignment that's creating the dissonance that I experience as discomfort. And so when I finally got that every place, every twinge of discomfort is an invitation to heal, the resistance stopped. Now, it doesn't mean I don't hesitate. It doesn't mean I don't get to the edge and go, okay, they're telling me there's water in the swimming pool. That it's okay to jump off the diving board, but I don't see the water. I don't smell no chlorine. I ain't believing you today. So I'm going to just stay right. I'm going to sit down on the edge of this little board here and wait until I have grown my faith muscle enough to jump. Right. And so if we would give one another the freedom and the love and the support to just be on the journey, to quit shoulding on each other, because shoulding on people makes them stink. It's just, quit it. Right. We have a phrase in the South, you may be familiar with this, Reverend Z, that I ain't better got to do nothing. Right? And if we would love each other in that place spiritually, that folks ain't better got to do nothing. Then we can meet them in the space where they are. And instead of thinking that as a minister, I'm supposed to have answers for you, when really I'm just supposed to be your tour guide. I'm supposed to be your Sherpa to support you on your journey, not to tell you where your journey is leading you or how to get there. My job is to be in service to you on your journey.
Amen. Amen. And as you were saying that, I this song, I equate it to Southerners for sure. Everything is with a song. And when you were saying that, the thing that came to my mind is, I'm sure everybody in the New Thought community will know this song. Something's calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. And so as we bump up against these hard rocks, if you will, these hard edges, something calling us to go a little deeper. Because we know roots, we see plants come up out of concrete. So there is no barrier when it's hard. It finds a way. It sinks the roots deeper, and it finds a way to continue to grow. And that's what life is telling us when we find something that we don't agree with, or that rubs us the wrong way, or puts us out. Spirit, God itself is calling us a little bit deeper than we've ever been before, and we got to go at it. And that's why I love this. I love this month. For those who have embraced and those who are still fighting, it's calling you a little bit deeper than you've been before. And we know the magnificence of what happens when we send in deep roots. We find new sources of water. We find more fertile ground. We found a greater foundation in which to build our lives and our livelihoods and our relationships and everything on. And that's what God is saying in every way possible to us as a humanity, one family, that I have visions beyond your wildest dreams. Just keep on digging deeper, and you will be revealed something that will simply amaze you.
Yeah, if we want a higher consciousness, the way to higher is deeper.
Yes. Amen. And I love that tourist guide point. That is, I'm gonna steal that if you don't mind, because
have at it.
Because if you've been on a good tour, the tour guide doesn't tell you what pictures to take. It don't tell you what poses to take. It just says in the brochure, here is the path that we will be taking. If this path is interesting to you, jump on the tour, and what you observe and what is open to your awareness and the friendships you make on that tour is not up to me. It's up to you. I'm just going to tell you what I know, not what I heard. This is where it began. This is how you get over here. You figure out how you want to navigate and deal with it yourself. I love that.
Yeah.
What an amazing tour it has been. See, that's what we love about this program, folks, is we always find a launching off point, and we never quite know where we're going to make landfall yet. Now, I don't know that we've exactly made landfall yet, but I do want to remind you that you're more than welcome to be a part of the conversation. If you'd like to join us, please, there's an email there going across your screen, ministertalk@ntmedia.org. Leave a comment in the comment box if there's something you'd like any of us to elaborate on, or if you'd like to hear more of. If you'd like to connect with any of us beyond this program, you can drop an email there, and we'll make sure that you get to whoever you're looking to get to if you want to speak to Reverend Rafe or myself or Rev Z or any of that. So, all right, guys, so here we are. We're coming in on the home stretch. We came in the door with this recognition that Pride is not, it's not just a party. And personally, I think that in some ways Pride has been co-opted, much like we've co-opted Cinco de Mayo and so many other culturally appropriate honorings of historical points in time where consciousness shifted. Stonewall was that moment where a consciousness shifted. I believe we're in a similar state of shift in the New Thought movement at this point, of how we connect, how we respect, how we honor our brothers, sisters, and I don't know the appropriate term, but everyone in between, all of the one, that place where we don't see the other, where we recognize there are those that still don't see quite the way we do, and we're open to anyone that wants to see that beauty, that majesty, that evolution of consciousness, that moving into a world that works for everyone. Before we wrap it up today, what's the most important thing people take away from this conversation and are able to take out into their worlds in the coming weeks? In 30 seconds or less.
Of course.
Dare to be curious.
Ooh.
Dare to be curious. And I know as a transgender man, it's easy to get sick of educating people. And where I resolved that is, it took me 43 years to reconcile, to unravel all of the indoctrination and teachings that I had been raised with, to not be okay with myself. And so if I spend 43 years being an open vessel to educate other people, then I'm okay with that. I do a lot of work with other transgender guys, and it's like, it's not fair for us to take 43 years and expect everybody else to get it in 43 minutes. That's not fair. And so, be curious, be respectfully curious. Take the time, you can consult the Gospel According to Google for anything you want to know. And so take the time to do some of your own homework, and then ask respectful questions. Don't treat us like science experiments. Don't treat us like a freak show with freak show questions, and people know what I'm talking about, right? But actually engage, because here's the thing about curiosity. When we're curious, we're just learning more about ourselves. That's the truth of oneness. Dare to be curious, to learn something new about you by getting to know a different expression of you. Participate in the expansion.
And I would just dovetail on that if I could, and just, there's a saying my father always said that has stuck with me, where he says, "I'm telling you what I know, not what I heard."
Yeah.
And by being curious, just dovetailing off of that, that means I have to be curious enough to ask the question, and then I go and search the Googles and the whatevers. But at some point, I got to have some exploration. I got to have some experience. I got to be able to as Reverend Ray said earlier, not just give you some book knowledge or some theoretical ideological information, but speak from an experiential point that allows me to speak from my heart, that allows me to, and I'm quite sure that if not all of us, a large majority of us know when someone is talking from experience and from the heart, or whether they're giving you a theoretical conversation. And when they give you that from the heart inquiry, that in expression or whatever it is, it's received a lot better, and it helps us. Oh, I love it on the tour guide. I just love that. It helps us. So when I start recommending the tour of Greece, I'm not telling you I've been to the Acropolis. I'm telling you I've been to the Acropolis. Not that I've seen it from afar. I went there. I walked around it. I saw the restoration and the whole thing. And my expression of that is going to be so much more riveting and vivid that you're going to be sucked into that vortex and say, I got to learn more about this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we come back to learning.
Yeah.
We come back to that place of being open and being willing to learn again and again and again and again. Yeah. Reverend Rafe, I want to thank you for being here with us today. Tell everybody, just give us a couple of moments. How do we stay in touch, and where do we find you on Sundays?
You can find me on Sundays. We live stream on YouTube, Sierra Spiritual YouTube channel, live on Facebook, Sierra Center for Spiritual Living on Facebook, and on Zoom. You can find me at Rafe at sierracenter.org, and I will respond. You can also find me on Facebook on my personal page, Rafe A. Ellis. I am there. I'm pretty active on Facebook. I'm still trying to figure out some of the other platforms, because it takes time that I don't have.
Right.
Eventually I will get there. But don't hesitate to reach out, and I will make time for anyone
Absolutely.
who wants to travel.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. And you can find Rev Z over at the Center for Spiritual Living Denver, which also broadcasts here on the New Thought Media Network on Sunday mornings, as well as Friday mornings when Rev Z and I get together for our 7 a.m. program, which is affectionately known. Where is that? Oh, yes, there it is. Ministers Talking Bleep. That's on Friday morning, so join us for that too. Folks, thank you for being with us here today on the New Thought Media Network. If you'd like to know more about what we're doing, check out the website, ntmedia.org. Check our past broadcasts. On all of our programs are archived on YouTube and Facebook, and we've got more and more coming. So thank you all for being with us. Rev Rafe, I hope you come back and see us again sometime.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rev Z, final thought?
Hey, let's go out, have some conversation, and learn to engage and embrace new ideas, new people, so that we can all grow into the one family that we are.
Amen. Please help us thank our sponsors.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferland Foundation for your generous technology grant. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.